The town of Willow Creek always looked peaceful from the outside. Early in the morning, when the sun rose gently over the rooftops, the streets seemed calm, almost sleepy. Golden light touched the tops of old oak trees that stood like silent guards along the narrow roads. Small shops opened slowly, their windows glowing with warm yellow lights. Birds chirped on telephone wires, and the cool breeze carried the smell of fresh bread from a bakery on the corner. To anyone passing by, Willow Creek looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But beneath that quiet surface, the town carried old wounds, the kind people didn't talk about out loud. These wounds lived in whispers and long glances, in stories half told, and memories that people tried to bury. The town had a history of unfairness, especially toward Black residents. It wasn't the kind of racism people saw on the news, no loud shouting, no violent crowds. Instead, it lived in small moments that cut deep, the suspicious looks, the locked car doors, the soft but sharp comments that made people feel like outsiders in their own home. Willow Creek was divided in invisible ways. The center of town, filled with bright houses and clean streets, belonged mostly to white families. Meanwhile, the neighborhoods on the east side where most Black families lived had older homes, cracked sidewalks, and fewer streetlights. People said the town was equal. But anyone paying attention knew it wasn't. The same rules didn't apply to everyone. And the police, though friendly on the surface, were known for watching Black drivers longer, questioning them more, and stopping them for reasons that never made sense. Even the mornings carried tension. When a Black driver passed a patrol car, the peace in the air shifted softly but clearly. Mothers tightened their grip on their children's backpacks. Men kept both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. Everyone knew the unspoken rule: stay calm, move carefully. One mistake could change everything. So while Willow Creek looked quiet, almost perfect, the silence had weight. It held stories of fear, memories of injustice, and a truth people pretended not to see. It was a town where beauty hid pain, and calmness covered danger. And today, as the sun rose over the sleepy streets, another story was about to begin, one that would expose those hidden wounds for everyone to see. Marcus Hale was the kind of young man people admired without even knowing him. At 22 years old, he carried himself with a calm strength that came from growing up faster than most kids his age. He was tall, with warm brown eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something deeper than the moment he was in. His smile was gentle and honest, the kind that made people feel safe around him. But behind that smile lived a lifetime of lessons, some hopeful, others painful. Marcus was a college engineering student, one semester away from finishing his degree. He loved building things, fixing things, understanding how they worked. Machines made sense to him in ways people didn't. If something was broken, he believed it could be repaired with patience and the right tools. Maybe that belief came from his father, who had been a mechanic and taught Marcus about cars before he could even spell the word engine. His father's old silver sedan was Marcus's most treasured possession. The two of them had spent hours restoring it, polishing every detail. After his father passed away, the car became more than transportation. It became a memory, a connection, a promise. Every morning when Marcus started the engine, he felt like a piece of his father rode with him. Marcus wasn't just hardworking, he was responsible, respectful, and determined to build a better future for his family. He helped his mother with groceries, tutored his younger sister in math, and worked part-time to pay for textbooks. He didn't go to parties or waste time on trouble. He stayed focused, stayed quiet, stayed careful, because being Black in Willow Creek meant he didn't have the luxury of mistakes. But inside, Marcus carried something heavy, a constant worry he tried to hide. Ever since his father's death during a police stop, Marcus felt the world treated him as a threat before it ever saw him as a person. Even when he wore a clean shirt, carried his school bag, and spoke politely, he felt the weight of eyes watching him. Still, he refused to let fear control him. Marcus believed in dreams bigger than the town he lived in. He believed in change, in fairness, in rising above the darkness around him. And most of all, he believed in becoming the kind of man his father would be proud of. Today, As Marcus prepared for the biggest opportunity of his life, he didn't know one simple drive would test everything he believed in. Marcus Hale's life was shadowed by a story he never wanted to relive but could never forget: the story of his father's last day. His father, Elijah Hale, had been a kind, hard-working man who loved his family above all else. He had hands roughened by years of fixing engines, a laugh that could fill a room, and a heart that always looked for the good in people. But one quiet evening, everything changed. It was a routine drive, Elijah returning home from work in his silver sedan, the same car Marcus would later restore. A police officer had stopped him, claiming he was driving suspiciously. No warning, no real reason. The stop escalated too quickly. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and before anyone could understand what happened, Elijah was gone. Marcus was just a boy when the news arrived. The house filled with silence that screamed louder than anything he could ever hear. His mother wept quietly in her room. His sister, too young to understand fully, asked questions that Marcus couldn't answer. And Marcus, he felt powerless, confused, and terrified. That moment became the lens through which Marcus saw the world. Every police car on the road, every suspicious look from strangers, every whispered comment about boys like him carried the weight of that tragedy. The fear wasn't just about authority, was about survival, about knowing that, no matter how careful you were, the world could treat you as a threat, simply for the color of your skin. But the fear came with lessons. His father's death taught Marcus to be cautious, yes, but also resilient. He learned to carry himself with dignity, to speak with calm confidence, and to work harder than anyone else. He learned that his father's life, and his untimely death, were not reasons to surrender, they were reasons to rise. Yet, some nights, the memories haunted him. The image of his father's car pulled over on the side of the road, the sound of sirens, the fear in his mother's eyes, it all returned like a storm he couldn't escape. Marcus knew that every choice he made on the road, every interaction, could echo the past. He carried that history quietly, like a shadow at his side. This painful family history shaped Marcus's careful courage. It molded him into someone who understood the world's dangers but refused to be paralyzed by them. Today, as he prepared for a drive that could define his future, Marcus felt both fear and determination, two forces pulling him in opposite directions, yet both rooted in the memory of a father he could never forget. The Hale family was small but tightly knit, bound together by love, shared memories, and the quiet strength that comes from facing life's struggles together. Marcus lived with his mother, Angela, a woman whose heart carried both tenderness and an unshakable determination. She had raised Marcus and his younger sister Layla, almost single-handedly after Elijah's death, filling the house with warmth while quietly carrying the weight of past sorrows. Angela's love was expressed in small, careful ways. She prepared Marcus's favorite breakfast on early mornings, ironed his shirt for interviews, and reminded him, often gently but firmly, to watch the road and be careful because the world isn't always fair. Those words, repeated countless times, were a mix of caution and fear that Marcus would face the same dangers his father had. Angela's eyes, deep and expressive, often lingered on Marcus a moment longer than usual when he left the house, silently hoping he would return safely. Isla, Marcus's younger sister, looked up to him with a combination of admiration and curiosity. At 15, she was bright, outspoken, and fiercely proud of her brother. Though she did not yet understand the depth of the threats he faced in a world biased against him. To her, Marcus was invincible, the kind of hero stories were made of: strong, patient, and unshakably brave. But Marcus knew better. He knew that beneath his composed exterior, fear often coursed through him like a hidden river, quiet but persistent. Despite their closeness, the Hales carried unspoken fears in their home. Conversations about racism were careful, coded, and sometimes avoided altogether. Yet, the silence spoke volumes. Every glance, every cautious reminder, every pause in conversation was a small echo of the dangers they lived with. It was a family living in love but under the shadow of uncertainty, where every ordinary day could carry extraordinary risk. And yet, within that love and worry, there was also hope. The Hales celebrated small victories, Marcus passing a difficult exam, Layla mastering a new skill, the family sharing a rare, joyful evening together. These moments were lifelines, reminders that even in a world marked by prejudice, connection and resilience could thrive. The Hale family was a sanctuary in a town full of hidden wounds, a place where love coexisted with fear, and courage was nurtured quietly, within the hearts of those who refused to let the past define them. Today, as Marcus prepared for a drive that could challenge every lesson he had learned, the weight of his family's love and worry traveled with him. Invisible but unbreakable, shaping every decision he would make. Marcus Hale gripped the steering wheel of his father's silver sedan, his knuckles tight but his mind focused. Today was important, an interview that could change the course of his life. He had prepared for weeks, rehearsing answers, polishing his resume, and imagining the moment he would step into a room where his talent could finally speak for itself. Yet, as he pulled out of the driveway, an old, familiar tension settled over him like a heavy fog. "Drive carefully," his mother had said, her voice soft but carrying an edge Marcus knew well. Not because of traffic or bad weather, but because he was Black, and the world didn't always see him as just a young man heading to a job interview. That small cautionary phrase had become part of a daily ritual, a reminder of the invisible rules he had learned long ago. The streets of Willow Creek were quiet, yet Marcus felt eyes on him everywhere. Pedestrians paused a little too long to watch, shopkeepers followed him with fleeting glances, and the subtle hum of tension hung in the air. Each step of the drive reminded him that his existence on these roads was not always welcome, that his mere presence could raise suspicion, and that caution was more than common sense, it was survival. Then, in the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed a patrol car parked across the street. Its engine idled quietly, almost blending into the morning calm, but Marcus knew the signs. A slow, deliberate turn of the wheel, a slight shift in posture, he was being watched. His heart rate increased, yet he stayed composed. He had learned to breathe through fear, to move with deliberate calm, to carry himself as if nothing could harm him, even when the world had taught him otherwise. As the patrol car started to follow, Marcus's mind raced. Every stop sign, every turn, every lane change became a test. He recalled his father's story, how one routine drive had ended in tragedy. The memory was sharp, painful, and immediate. He reminded himself to stay visible, keep his hands on the wheel, and speak only when necessary. Each rule he had internalized for years now guided him through a morning drive that had suddenly become a confrontation with the unseen forces of prejudice. By the time Marcus reached the main road, the tension was undeniable. The patrol car had not yet signaled to pull him over, but the subtle pressure was already mounting. Every mile felt heavier, and the silver sedan carried not just Marcus, but the weight of history, fear, and unspoken injustice. Today, something as simple as driving had transformed into a moment that would test everything he had learned about courage, patience, and resilience. Marcus Hale could feel it before he even glanced in the rearview mirror, the quiet, unrelenting presence of the patrol car. It didn't turn on its lights, it didn't follow too closely, yet its presence was unmistakable. A silent observer, waiting, watching, measuring every movement. The sedan hummed softly beneath him, a comforting sound against the growing tension. Yet even that familiar hum could not drown out the anxiety tightening his chest. Time seemed to stretch. Every intersection became a stage. Every passing pedestrian a potential witness to what could happen next. Marcus's hands gripped the wheel a little tighter, knuckles white. He could almost hear the echoes of his father's voice, the memory of that fateful drive whispering warnings he had never wanted to hear but could never ignore. He was not just driving for himself today, he was driving under the weight of history, memory, and inherited fear. The patrol car adjusted its position, subtle but deliberate. Marcus caught the reflection of the officer's eyes in the side mirror, hard and calculating, scanning him as if trying to read something invisible. He had seen it before, the suspicion in a gaze, the assumption that a black man behind the wheel was automatically suspect. He had prepared for this, rehearsed every potential reaction in his mind, yet nothing could make the fear fully disappear. He reminded himself to stay calm, stay visible, stay polite. Every instinct screamed to speed up, to escape, to assert control. But Marcus knew that any sudden movement could be misinterpreted. His father's story was proof enough. Even careful compliance could be dangerous if the observer carried prejudice. The streets of Willow Creek seemed quieter than usual. Shops were opening, neighbors waved, but Marcus felt isolated. The patrol car's engine remained a low growl behind him, a heartbeat that mirrored his own. He imagined every possible scenario being stopped, questioned, accused unfairly. Each thought carried weight, and yet he refused to surrender to panic. As Marcus approached the first main intersection, the patrol car followed a little closer. The tension was palpable, a tightrope stretched over an unseen chasm. Every stop sign, every pedestrian glance, every flicker of light across the sedans hood intensified the moment. It was as if the entire town held its breath, waiting. For what? Marcus didn't know, but he felt it. The silent judgment, the invisible threat, and the anticipation of confrontation. In that moment, Marcus realized something profound. Today, the drive was no longer just about reaching a job interview. It had become a test of courage, patience, and resilience, a challenge to stand firm in the face of quiet but relentless prejudice. And as the patrol car mirrored every turn, Marcus braced himself for what was inevitable. Marcus Hale drove carefully through the familiar streets of Willow Creek, but the sense of unease that had been building all morning refused to fade. At first it was subtle, the sideways glances from pedestrians waiting at crosswalks, the slight stiffening of posture when he passed a group of white teenagers on the sidewalk. These small, almost imperceptible gestures carried a weight that never left him. They were reminders that the world often judged him before it saw him, that his very presence as a black man could stir suspicion without reason. Even the drivers around him contributed to the tension. A car slowed just enough to match his pace, its occupants staring a little too long at him through tinted windows. Marcus felt the familiar mix of frustration and anxiety. He had learned long ago that nothing he did could erase preconceived notions. Smile, obey the rules, stay commit rarely mattered. These small interactions were a constant reminder of the invisible barriers he faced. As he approached the town center, Marcus noticed a store clerk who paused mid-sweep and looked at him with a glance that lingered too long. His stomach tightened. It wasn't overt hostility, just subtle suspicion, the kind that was easy for outsiders to ignore but impossible for someone like him to overlook. Each flicker of distrust added to the growing pressure in his chest, a reminder of the careful choreography required just to navigate the town safely. Marcus's mind raced. He remembered the countless times he had felt judged while simply existing in public spaces. The science fair in middle school, the grocery store trips, even casual walks around the neighborhood, always followed by silent scrutiny, whispers, or double checks. It was exhausting, but it had also taught him vigilance, patience, and the skill of remaining composed in uncomfortable situations. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of his purpose today. The interview, the opportunity, the future. He could not let the town's silent prejudice dictate his path. And yet, every glance, every stare, every hesitation of a pedestrian was a quiet affirmation of the systemic bias that lingered in Willow Creek. It was a tension he had learned to carry like a shadow, a constant companion on every street, every drive, every step he took outside his home. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel, forcing his focus back to the road. He had faced suspicion countless times before, but this morning felt different. Something in the air, in the way the town seemed to watch him, told him that today's drive would be more than just a commute. It would be a test of courage, awareness, and restraint. And somewhere deep inside, Marcus knew he could not afford a single mistake. Marcus Hale had been driving for only a few minutes when he noticed it. The familiar hum of a patrol car that seemed to appear out of nowhere, a shadow slipping into the lane behind him. At first, he tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was coincidence. Police cars were common in Willow Creek, after all. But there was something in the way the vehicle followed him that made the hair on the back of his neck rise a deliberate, measured pace that mirrored his every move. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The officer's eyes were focused, scanning him as if searching for some hidden clue that didn't exist. Marcus felt the old, bitter weight of fear pressing on his chest, a memory he had carried since childhood. This was no ordinary drive anymore. The subtle tension that had followed him through the streets now sharpened into something more tangible, a quiet pursuit that demanded attention, caution, and composure. Marcus's thoughts raced. Every lesson his mother and father had taught him returned. Keep your hands visible, follow the law precisely, never raise your voice, and always remain polite. The patrol car adjusted its position, staying just behind him, never making a move that was overt, yet enough to make him aware that he was being watched closely. The calm morning felt like a trap, the peaceful streets a stage for scrutiny he could not avoid. His mind wandered to past experiences: the middle school incident when a security guard had assumed he was skipping class, the grocery store trips where store clerks followed his movements, the subtle warnings from neighbors. Marcus had learned early that his very presence could be perceived as threatening, even when he did nothing wrong. And now, with the patrol car tailing him silently, he felt those lessons become urgent guides for survival. Despite the anxiety building inside him, Marcus forced himself to breathe deeply. He reminded himself of his purpose today, the job interview, the chance to step into a world where his abilities could finally be recognized. But even as he focused, every mile brought a quiet tension, a constant reminder of the systemic biases and unspoken fears that had shaped his life. The pursuit was silent, but heavy. Marcus knew that one wrong move, one nervous gesture, could change everything in an instant. He stayed calm, eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel tightly, fully aware that this ordinary drive had become a test of courage, patience, and resilience. And in that tense silence, Marcus Hale felt the weight of generations pressing down on him, yet he refused to let it break him. Marcus Hale felt the tension building inside him like a storm, silent but powerful. Every mile he drove, every glance in the rearview mirror, reminded him that fear was not a choice, it was a companion he carried for life. The patrol car behind him was a constant presence, quiet yet suffocating. And Marcus knew the world often judged him long before it saw him as a person. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid beat of his heart. Stay calm. Stay polite. Hands on the wheel. Eyes forward. He repeated these silent commands over and over, but the memories of his father crept into his mind, sharp and painful. He saw Elijah Hale's final drive, the traffic stop, the fear, the sudden escalation, the sound of sirens. Marcus had been a boy then, powerless, terrified, and now, years later, he felt the same trembling threat, amplified by the weight of history. Marcus struggled with anger, frustration, and helplessness, emotions he had buried under layers of discipline and caution. Why did mere existence in Willow Creek carry suspicion? Why did he have to follow invisible rules that no one else seemed to need? The questions echoed in his mind, creating a cacophony of doubt. But Marcus also knew that panic or defiance could be dangerous. Every instinct screamed at him to fight back, to assert his innocence. But he had learned the hard way that restraint could save lives. Yet, restraint was not easy. His mind raced through scenarios. What if the officer misunderstood a gesture? What if a simple reaction was interpreted as a threat? The anxiety was suffocating. Yet he forced himself to focus on the familiar rhythm of the car. The soft hum of the engine beneath him, the sunlight glinting off the hood. These small comforts anchored him, reminding him that he was not powerless, even in fear. Marcus also thought of his mother and sister, their faces flashing in his mind. Angela's gentle warnings, Layla's admiration, the love and worry that shaped his family. These memories were both a balm and a burden. He couldn't fail them. He couldn't let fear control him. He had to navigate this moment with courage, discipline, and clarity. As the patrol car mirrored his every turn, Marcus realized that this was more than a drive, it was a battle within himself. Fear pressed in from every side, but he was determined to face it head-on. Every breath, Every heartbeat, every careful movement, was a small act of defiance against a world that too often judged him unfairly. In this silent struggle, Marcus Hale learned a truth he had always carried. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. As Marcus Hale continued down the quiet streets of Willow Creek, memories from his past rose unbidden, sharp and vivid. The patrol car following him seemed to echo the old lessons he had learned over a lifetime, lessons born not from choice, but from pain and loss. He remembered the middle school science fair. The day a security guard had stopped him in the hallway, assuming he was up to no good. Even though he had only been walking to present his project, the incident left a mark, a memory that whispered constantly about how the world often misjudged him. He recalled grocery store trips with his mother, where clerks followed his movements, their eyes tracking him as if he were a suspect. The subtle glances of neighbors, the whispered warnings, the unspoken rules, he had memorized them all. These memories were not just reminders of injustice, they were survival lessons. Marcus had learned to anticipate bias, to measure every gesture, every word, every breath, knowing that his safety sometimes depended on small, careful actions. And yet, memory carried both pain and guidance. He thought of his father, Elijah Hale, who had taught him to be patient, disciplined, and precise. Respect earns you space, son, his father had said, but the world won't always give it. You have to hold your head high anyway. Marcus remembered the silver sedan, the hours they had spent restoring it together, and the lessons of resilience that had been passed down with grease-stained hands and quiet conversations. The patrol car behind him now made those lessons more real than ever. Fear pressed against him, familiar and unrelenting, but he also felt the strength of everything his father had taught him. The world could doubt him, question him, and judge him unjustly. But Marcus knew he could control his own actions, his own responses, his own courage. Each memory was a reminder that resilience was built not in comfort, but in challenge. As the streets unfolded ahead, Marcus's mind raced through the past and the present simultaneously. Every glance from a pedestrian, every turn signal misread, every silent evaluation became a part of the ongoing test of his endurance. Yet within the anxiety, there was clarity. These memories were not chains, they were guides. They were proof that he could navigate the road safely, with awareness, dignity, and determination. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history, the lessons of his past, and the urgency of the moment. He knew that this drive would test more than his skill. Behind the wheel, it would test everything he had learned about courage, patience, and the strength to rise above prejudice. Marcus Hale's heart pounded as the patrol car's lights finally blinked on behind him, cutting through the morning calm like a warning. He pulled over onto the shoulder, the silver sedan rolling slowly to a stop, engine humming softly under his tense hands. What had started as an ordinary drive now felt like stepping onto a stage where every gesture, every word, every breath would be scrutinized. The officer, Deputy Cole, approached with a measured pace, eyes fixed on Marcus with a sharp intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Marcus kept his hands clearly visible on the steering wheel, fingers trembling slightly, and tried to maintain a calm, steady gaze. "Good morning, sir," he said politely, his voice controlled, though his chest tightened with fear. Cole's first words were clipped, formal, but carried suspicion. "License and registration," he demanded, leaning slightly into the open window. There was no warmth, no explanation, just the silent implication that Marcus had done something wrong simply by being there. Marcus handed over his documents carefully, every motion deliberate, aware that any misstep could escalate the situation. As Cole inspected the papers, Marcus felt a familiar mix of anger, frustration, and fear swirling inside him. Why was this happening again? Why did routine driving, something most people did without thought, become a potential trap for him? Every memory of past stops, past judgments, and past tragedies pressed against him like weighty shadows. The silver sedan, his father's car, felt suddenly vulnerable, more like a cage than a vehicle of freedom. Then Cole asked the question Marcus had feared but expected. "Where are you coming from, and where are you going?" The tone was polite enough on the surface, but the undercurrent of doubt was unmistakable. Marcus answered calmly, stating his destination, the interview, the purpose of his drive, but the officer's eyes betrayed disbelief, as if his words alone weren't enough to prove his innocence. Marcus realized the routine stop had already shifted into a psychological battlefield. Every movement, every word, every breath was a negotiation for safety, dignity, and respect. The calm morning had been shattered. What should have been a simple interaction had become a test. Could he maintain composure under scrutiny? Could he assert his humanity without triggering anger or suspicion? As he waited, heart racing, Marcus reflected that this moment, this ordinary yet charged encounter, was more than just a stop. It was a stark reminder of the world he lived in, a world where bias and prejudice lurk behind even the simplest rules. And in that tension, Marcus braced himself, knowing that how he handled the next few minutes could define not just this drive, but his resilience and courage. Deputy Cole approached Marcus Hale's silver sedan with a measured, deliberate pace, his polished boots clicking against the asphalt. To an outsider, he might have appeared professional, even composed, but Marcus could sense the subtle edge of assumption in his stance, the unspoken judgment that colored every word, every glance, every movement. Cole was not a villain in the obvious sense. He was the embodiment of systemic bias. A man shaped by rules and perceptions that often saw Marcus as a threat before recognizing his humanity. Marcus observed the officer carefully. Cole's posture was rigid, shoulders slightly forward, hands hovering near his belt, a subtle signal that Marcus had learned to read over years of experience. The officer's eyes scanned the car, lingering on Marcus a fraction longer than necessary, a silent evaluation that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. This was everyday bias, unspoken yet palpable, and it carried weight heavier than any raised voice. As Cole asked for license and registration, his tone was clipped. Professional on the surface, but layered with skepticism. Marcus handed over the documents. Noting how the officer's fingers hesitated slightly over the paperwork, a micro-expression that revealed doubt. This was not about safety. It was about perception. A quiet reminder that Marcus's presence alone could provoke suspicion. Every motion, every breath, was being judged against an invisible standard that he could never fully meet. Marcus's mind raced with a mixture of fear and controlled defiance. He had learned to navigate these moments with precision, hands visible, tone calm, words deliberate. But the emotional toll was undeniable. He could feel the weight of his father's story pressing down on him, the memory of that tragic day sharpening the stakes. Cole's presence was a mirror reflecting not just the immediate stop, but the history of prejudice that Marcus carried in his bones. Even as he stayed composed, Marcus sensed the subtle tension. Cole's assumptions were almost automatic, rooted in patterns reinforced over time, yet they still affected real lives. It was the kind of bias that didn't make headlines, but left scars on those forced to endure it daily. In that moment, Marcus understood the depth of the challenge before him, not just to navigate the stop safely, but to assert his dignity in a world that too often failed to see him fully. Cole, unaware of the emotional battlefield he had entered, completed his cursory inspection with the same subtle suspicion, reinforcing Marcus's awareness that this was no ordinary encounter. Every interaction, every movement, was a test of resilience, patience, and courage, a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles were fought quietly, in the face of everyday bias. MarcusHales.com composure began to crack, as Deputy Cole's tone shifted subtly, imperceptible to an outsider but clear to Marcus. The officer's words, once clipped and procedural, became sharper, more insistent, carrying the silent implication that compliance alone might not be enough. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," Cole commanded. His voice firm, but carrying that underlying suspicion that made Marcus's stomach knot. Marcus's mind raced. He had practiced this scenario countless times in his head, but now, in the real world, every rule felt like a fragile barrier against potential danger. His hands remained visible on the wheel, but the tension in his fingers reflected the inner turmoil. Step out, or stay seated. The right choice depended entirely on the officer's interpretation, which Marcus could not control. The weight of history and inherited fear pressed down on him. Marcus's mind raced. He had practiced this scenario countless times in his head, but now, in the real world, every rule felt like a fragile barrier against potential danger. His hands remained visible on the wheel, but the tension in his fingers reflected the inner turmoil. Step out, or stay seated. The right choice depended entirely on the officer's interpretation, which Marcus could not control. The weight of history and inherited fear pressed down on him. The silver sedan felt suddenly smaller, confined, like a trap rather than a car. Every motion Marcus considered seemed risky, reaching for the glove box, adjusting the seatbelt, even breathing too loudly. He could hear the subtle shift in the patrol car, the officer's partner arriving, footsteps echoing on the pavement. The presence of a second uniform intensified the situation, making it clear that this was no longer a routine stop. The once ordinary drive had transformed into a delicate negotiation of survival. Marcus's heart raced as he processed Cole's commands. Confusion mingled with fear, each decision fraught with consequence. Would one wrong gesture, one misunderstood word, escalate the encounter further? He recalled his father's story, the tragic result of a drive that had seemed ordinary. Every memory, every lesson, every warning from his mother surged forward, sharpening his awareness. He had to remain calm, even as adrenaline surged and uncertainty clouded his mind. The tension on the road was mirrored in the silence of the surrounding neighborhood. Shops opened slowly, neighbors glanced curiously, but none interfered. Marcus was acutely aware that he was on display, judged, scrutinized not for what he had done, but for who he was and how the world perceived him. The commands, confusion, and subtle threats combined into a tangible danger that made time stretch and the air feel heavier. In that charged silence, Marcus realized the stakes of this encounter. It was a test of patience, awareness, and courage under pressure. Each second demanded precision. Each movement carried consequences. And as he obeyed carefully, heart pounding, Marcus understood a painful truth sometimes. Survival required more than good intentions. It required mastery over fear itself. As Marcus Hale sat tense in the driver's seat, a quiet awareness crept into his consciousness. Someone was watching. From across the street, near the corner store, a figure held a phone up, recording the unfolding encounter. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. In another world, he might have felt relief at having a witness, but here in Willow Creek, it only added another layer of complexity. The bystander was present, capturing every moment, yet not stepping in to help, not saying a word. The presence of the recording amplified Marcus's anxiety. Every movement he made, every gesture, every blink of an eye, was now visible to someone outside the immediate tension. The awareness that a stranger was documenting the stop made the air feel heavier, almost suffocating. Marcus forced himself to breathe, keeping hands on the wheel, posture straight, and voice calm. The camera's silent lens was another reminder of how public his life could feel, how the simplest drive could be scrutinized and judged. He could see the reflection of the bystander's phone in the window, a small rectangle holding his image, and the unfolding scene in stark detail. It reminded him of past viral videos, stories he had seen on the news, where ordinary encounters escalated, often unfairly, into life-changing events. His pulse quickened, knowing that one wrong movement or misinterpreted word could be captured and used against him. Marcus understood all too well the power and danger of being observed in a world already biased against him. Yet, within this tension, a strange clarity emerged. The bystander's presence, even passive, forced Marcus to focus. He reminded himself that fear could not dominate him, that his reactions mattered more than the silent judgment of the observer. Each word he spoke, each motion he made, was now deliberate, carefully measured, an exercise in controlled courage. Still, he could not help but feel a pang of isolation. The bystander could record everything but could not intervene to ease the burden, could not speak for him or protect him from bias. Marcus felt the weight of a lifetime in that moment, the memory of his father, the lessons from his mother, the fear and resilience passed down through generations. All of it converged in the silver sedan, with the patrol car behind him and the silent witness across the street. In that tense intersection of observation, fear, and control, Marcus realized a crucial truth: even when others watched, even when help seemed absent, his strength, patience, and composure were his own, and it was these qualities that would define how he navigated the dangerous, precarious path ahead. Marcus Hale felt his chest tighten as he noticed the second patrol car turning the corner, sliding quietly into position behind Deputy Cole's vehicle. Its arrival was subtle but unmistakably a silent reinforcement that transformed an already tense stop into a high-stakes standoff. The calm morning seemed to shrink, the streets of Willow Creek closing in on him, as if the neighborhood itself had become a stage for a moment that carried more weight than anyone else realized. The second officer, uniformed and polished, approached with precise steps, mirroring Cole's deliberate posture. Marcus felt a surge of anxiety. Two officers now, watching, evaluating, waiting. He could almost feel the pressure of their gazes through the window, a weight that pressed on his shoulders and his chest. Every minor movement, every blink, every subtle adjustment could be scrutinized and misinterpreted. The silver sedan, once a symbol of independence and memory, now felt confined, a fragile vessel of vulnerability. Marcus reminded himself to stay calm, hands on the wheel, voice steady, breathing measured. He repeated the familiar instructions silently, clinging to the lessons learned from his father and his mother. Yet the tension was almost unbearable. Two sets of eyes, two potential interpretations of every action, multiplied the stakes. The familiar fear of being judged by appearance alone surged, a tidal wave of anxiety mixed with the instinct for self. Deputy Cole exchanged a brief nod with the second officer, a silent communication that Marcus couldn't read but could feel in the air. The subtle shift in posture, the tightening of their hands, the measured steps all signaled an escalation. What had begun as a routine stop had transformed into a delicate, high-pressure test of patience, composure, and survival skills. In the sedan, Marcus's mind raced. Memories of his father's final drive pressed forward. The warning signs he had ignored as a boy now mirrored in the officer's silent authority. The fear was sharp, immediate, and raw. Yet, alongside the fear, a quiet determination rose within him. He could not lose control. He could not allow panic to dictate his actions. Every word, every movement, every blink had to convey calm, respect, and dignity. As the second officer reached the driver's side, the tension in the air became almost tangible. Marcus knew this moment could define the rest of his day, perhaps more. It was no longer just a traffic stop, it was a test of courage under scrutiny, a confrontation with systemic prejudice, and a trial of everything he had learned to navigate as a black man in Willow Creek. The stakes had never felt higher, and Marcus braced himself for the moment when action would be unavoidable. Marcus Hale felt the weight of the world pressing down on him, as both officers now loomed by the silver sedan. The tension in the air was suffocating, yet something inside him steadied. This was more than fear, it was history, memory, and expectation converging in one moment. He could feel his father's presence, the lessons his mother had instilled, and the strength of his own resilience all calling him to act with calm and dignity. His hands remained firmly on the wheel, every muscle tight but controlled. He spoke in a measured, even tone, answering questions carefully, deliberately, without raising his voice. Fear screamed for him to flee, to challenge, to resist, but Marcus knew that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was standing firm despite fear, and he resolved that no instinctive panic would control his actions. The officer's eyes were sharp, evaluating, searching for something, anything, to validate their suspicion. Marcus felt their silent judgment, a weight as tangible as the leather steering wheel beneath his hands. He reminded himself of all he had learned, the subtle commands to remain visible, the importance of calm composure, and the power of patience in moments when the world seemed poised to misjudge him. As Cole leaned slightly closer, questioning him about minor details, Marcus kept his tone polite yet confident. Each answer was precise, each movement deliberate. He didn't fidget, He didn't glance away nervously, and he didn't let the fear dictate his body language. Every breath, every blink, every word was a conscious choice to assert his humanity without confrontation. Inside the car, adrenaline pulsed, but Marcus found a rhythm in the chaos, a quiet anchor. He focused on the silver sedan, on the road ahead, on the memories of his father's lessons. This drive, this stop, was no longer just about getting to the interview. It was a test of his strength, his patience, and his ability to remain composed under scrutiny. By standing firm, Marcus demonstrated something that transcended the immediate fear: resilience, dignity, and self-respect. The officer's scrutiny could not break him. The bias in the air could not define him. In this tense moment, Marcus realized that true courage was claiming one's space in the world, asserting one's presence calmly, and refusing to let fear control his destiny. And as the seconds stretched into minutes, Marcus Hale felt the first flicker of victory, not in confrontation, not in escape, but in the quiet assertion of his inner strength, standing firm while the world tried to test him. As Marcus Hale remained calm and composed in the driver's seat, a subtle tension began to unfold between the two officers. Deputy Cole's approach had been firm, rigid, and rooted in suspicion, while the second officer, Officer Ramirez, moved with a slightly different energy, a careful awareness that hinted at doubt in Cole's assumptions. The silent clash between justice and prejudice became almost palpable, echoing in the air like a quiet argument no one dared voice aloud. Marcus felt it immediately. While Cole leaned in with clipped commands and sharp scrutiny, Ramirez observed more cautiously, glancing occasionally at the patrol car's dashboard and then at Marcus. His eyes, though professional, carried a trace of concern, an acknowledgement that the stop might not be entirely justified. Marcus knew he could not rely on this awareness, but it offered a quiet reassurance: not everyone blindly followed bias. The subtle tension between the officers intensified as Cole questioned Marcus over minor details: gestures, timing, and routes taken, while Ramirez's posture softened, a quiet counterweight to the mounting suspicion. Marcus recognized the dynamic instantly: two men, shaped by their experiences and beliefs, negotiating the space between law and prejudice. One saw threat, the other recognized caution and humanity. Inside the silver sedan, Marcus felt the emotional weight shift. Every careful word he spoke seemed to ripple through this silent conflict. The officers' differing approaches created a tense balance, as if the outcome of the stop depended not only on Marcus's actions but on their ability to confront their own assumptions. Each passing second carried the possibility of escalation or, if justice prevailed, a release from tension. Marcus thought of his father and mother, of the lessons in dignity and patience. He realized that this moment reflected a broader truth: bias did not exist in isolation, and even small interventions of awareness or fairness could tip the scale toward justice. Ramirez's subtle interventions, though unspoken, reminded Marcus that courage and composure could influence more than one's own outcome. They could challenge prejudice silently, through presence and principle. As the stop reached its peak, Marcus sat firmly, breathing steadily, aware of the conflict around him. Cole's rigid suspicion and Ramirez's cautious judgment mirrored a battle that transcended this single encounter, a battle between ingrained prejudice and the potential for fairness. And in that quiet struggle, Marcus understood a profound truth: sometimes survival depended not just on individual courage, but also on the choices and awareness of those around him, and the hope that justice could emerge even in moments weighted with bias. As the tension reached its peak, Marcus Hale finally allowed himself a single, deliberate act of courage, beyond mere compliance. His hands remained steady on the wheel, yet his mind focused sharply on one essential truth: understanding often began with honest, courageous questions. He leaned slightly forward and, in a calm but firm voice, asked, "Sir, may I ask why I was stopped?" The question hung in the air, carrying weight far beyond the simple words. It was not a challenge, nor a confrontation. It was a demand for clarity, a plea for accountability, and a subtle assertion of his dignity. Marcus had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind. knowing that asking directly could be dangerous if handled poorly, but he trusted his composure, the lessons of patience and self-control, and his own inner strength. Deputy Cole's expression shifted subtly. For a brief moment, the rigid suspicion that had dominated the stop wavered. Marcus noticed the micro-expressions, the slight tightening of the jaw, a pause, the brief glance toward Officer Ramirez. The question had planted a seed of reflection. It forced the officer to confront, even momentarily, the reason behind his assumptions. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. The words he had spoken were not just for him, they were a reminder of humanity, fairness, and the consequences of bias. Officer Ramirez stepped slightly closer, offering a quiet balance to the moment. His presence suggested acknowledgement, a silent support for accountability. Marcus realized that courage was not only about surviving fear, it was about holding space for truth, even in moments weighted with danger. Asking the question gave him a voice in a scenario designed to strip him of agency. The silence that followed was tense but instructive. Marcus's heart raced, yet he remained steady, breathing deeply, aware that this simple act of inquiry had shifted the dynamic subtly. He had asserted that he deserved explanation, that he deserved respect, and that his life and dignity could not be taken for granted. In that moment, Marcus understood a profound truth. Courage was more than compliance, more than survival. It was claiming one's humanity, speaking with integrity, and challenging injustice with composure and clarity. And as Deputy Cole finally responded, hesitant, measured, and perhaps reconsidering, the moment crystallized into a lasting lesson. Even in the face of fear and systemic bias, truth and courage could transform the encounter, creating a space for accountability and reflection. As Marcus Hale sat in the silver sedan, the tension that had gripped the morning seemed to ripple outward. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a few onlookers began to gather along the sidewalk. Drawn by the flashing lights and the low hum of police engines, their faces were curious, hesitant, and cautious. They did not intervene, but their presence created a silent audience, watching the stop unfold and bearing witness to a story that had too often gone unseen. Marcus felt their eyes, not with fear this time, but with a quiet awareness that lent him strength. Each glance from a bystander, each subtle pause in the street, underscored what he had already known. The injustice of prejudice was rarely hidden, it was often silent, subtle, and yet glaring. The crowd did not speak, yet their quiet observation amplified the truth of the moment. It was a collective acknowledgement that Marcus's dignity, patience, and courage were real, even when suspicion had been cast upon him. Deputy Cole remained focused on procedure, yet the weight of the silent witnesses seemed to press against him. Every command, every gesture, every word now existed in the presence of observers who would see how the encounter unfolded. Marcus realized that the silence of the crowd carried a power stronger than voices. It exposed the fragility of bias when confronted with calm dignity and accountability. Officer Ramirez shifted subtly, his awareness of the watching eyes altering his posture and approach. Marcus could feel a delicate shift in the tension. The presence of others reminded the officers that their actions had consequences beyond the immediate stop. Marcus's heart beat steadily, and he allowed himself a quiet recognition. He was no longer alone in this struggle. The collective, silent gaze of the bystanders amplified his courage, affirming that truth could not be entirely ignored. In that suspended moment, Marcus understood a vital truth about justice. It often relied not only on courage and restraint, but also on the watchfulness of a community willing to bear witness. Silence, when paired with attention, could reveal what words sometimes could not. The crowd's quiet presence became a shield, a subtle affirmation of his humanity, and a reminder that even in the face of prejudice, the power of observation and acknowledgement could tip the balance toward fairness. Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle within him. The stop was no longer just a test of obedience or patience, had become a demonstration of resilience, courage, and the quiet, undeniable truth that dignity, when upheld calmly, cannot be erased, even in the face of systemic bias. Marcus Hale exhaled deeply as the patrol car finally moved back, signaling the end of the 10th stop. The silver sedan was still, the engines hum now, a comforting reminder that the immediate danger had passed. Yet the emotional aftermath was heavy. Every muscle in his body remained tight, and his mind replayed the encounter in meticulous detail, searching for what had almost gone wrong and what had held him steady. As he gathered his documents from the dashboard, Marcus reflected on the subtle shifts that had occurred during the stop. Deputy Cole's rigid suspicion had been tempered, if only slightly, by Officer Ramirez's careful observations and the quiet presence of bystanders who had silently witnessed the event. Marcus realized that sometimes truth and accountability emerged, not through confrontation, but through steadfast composure and the careful assertion of one's dignity. The experience also highlighted the systemic biases that permeated everyday life. Marcus thought about all the stops, glances, and judgments he had endured over the years. Each memory seemed sharper now, but also clearer, providing insight into how prejudice operated quietly but powerfully. He understood that awareness and resilience were essential, not just for survival in individual moments, but as tools to navigate a world that often judged based on appearance rather than character. Marcus also reflected on the bystanders, who had recorded the encounter silently. Their presence had amplified his sense of responsibility to remain calm, to act with integrity, and to assert his rights through controlled courage rather than aggression. He realized that while their silence might have seemed passive, it had served as a witness to truth, a subtle yet important force against bias and unfair treatment. As Marcus drove away from the scene, a mixture of relief and reflection settled over him. The stop had ended without physical confrontation, but its lessons were profound. He had faced fear, prejudice, and tension head-on, and in doing so, discovered a deeper understanding of his own strength and resilience. The world had momentarily tested him, and he had passed not through defiance or argument, but through calm courage, self-awareness, and a refusal to let fear dictate his actions. In the quiet streets of Willow Creek, Marcus Hale felt a sense of clarity and empowerment. The stop was over, but its impact would resonate, a reminder of the ongoing struggle against bias, the necessity of courage in the face of fear, and the enduring power of personal dignity to reveal truth. As Marcus Hale drove away from the tense streets of Willow Creek, a quiet determination settled over him. The encounter with Deputy Cole and the silent patrol had left its mark, but instead of fear, it sparked a renewed sense of purpose. For years, Marcus had navigated prejudice with caution and restraint, surviving each encounter quietly. Now, he felt the stirring of something more, the realization that his experiences could become a voice for change, a tool to challenge bias and inspire awareness. Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned during the stop. Courage was not only about standing firm in moments of immediate danger, it was also about acknowledging injustice, speaking truth, and turning fear into action. Each gesture he had made, each carefully measured word, had carried weight, and he understood that his presence alone could demonstrate resilience, dignity, and empowerment to others facing similar struggles. He thought of the bystanders who had watched silently, recording the interaction without intervening. Their presence had underscored an important truth. Society often witnesses injustice without speaking up, and change begins with those who find the courage to raise their voices. Marcus realized that he could become one of those voices not in anger, but with clarity, honesty, and determination. His story, his experience, and his perspective could illuminate the subtle, systemic biases that others often overlooked. The silver sedan hummed along the quiet roads as Marcus envisioned a new path. He imagined sharing his story with his community, mentoring younger Black men who had learned early how to navigate fear, and working to create awareness about prejudice that existed in the most ordinary moments of life. Each idea was a spark, igniting a sense of purpose that had been dormant for too long. By the time he reached the edge of town, Marcus Hale had transformed the fear and tension of the morning into motivation, clarity, and resolve. The stop had tested his patience, composure, and courage, but it had also revealed the potential for action, advocacy, and empowerment. He understood that his voice could make a difference, that his calm courage could inspire others to stand firm, and that even small acts of resilience could ripple outward, challenging bias and creating change. For Marcus, the day was no longer only about survival, it was about finding his voice, embracing his power, and turning adversity into purpose. The drive had ended, but the journey toward empowerment and social impact had just begun. In the days following the traffic stop, Marcus Hale noticed subtle changes in the way Willow Creek responded. The event, captured by bystanders and shared quietly among neighbors, sparked conversations that had long been avoided. People began talking not in anger, but in curiosity and reflection about what had happened, about bias, privilege, and the challenges faced by Black members of the community. Marcus realized that his experience had become a catalyst for dialogue, a spark that ignited awareness where silence had previously prevailed. At the local cafe, he overheard residents discussing the stop, debating the decisions of the officers, and questioning the assumptions that had guided their actions. Some expressed discomfort, acknowledging that they had never truly considered how ordinary Black citizens were scrutinized in everyday moments. Others shared stories of friends or relatives who had faced similar prejudice. Marcus recognized that the conversations, tentative as they were, marked the beginning of community awakening, a collective reckoning with uncomfortable truths. Marcus himself participated cautiously at first, sharing his story with close friends and neighbors. His words were deliberate and measured, reflecting the lessons he had learned in courage, patience, and calm assertion during the stop. By speaking openly about his experience, he modeled how fear and trauma could be transformed into constructive dialogue. He witnessed firsthand the power of narrative. The simple act of telling one's truth encouraged others to listen, reflect, and challenge their own assumptions. The impact extended beyond conversation. Local groups and community leaders began organizing forums and workshops to address systemic bias, inviting residents to engage with one another in meaningful ways. Marcus realized that his personal encounter, though painful, had rippled outward, fostering awareness and inspiring collective action. What had once seemed like an isolated moment of injustice had become a seed for change, rooted in dialogue, empathy, and courage. Through it all, Marcus understood a profound lesson. Transformation begins with visibility and voice. By sharing his experience and remaining steadfast in the face of prejudice, he had not only reclaimed his dignity, but had also opened a pathway for understanding and growth within his community. In the quiet streets of Willow Creek, awareness was blossoming, and with it, the hope that bias could be challenged, empathy nurtured, and change set into motion, one courageous story at a time. Marcus Hale reflected on the harrowing traffic stop with a mixture of lingering fear and newfound clarity. The experience had been terrifying, but it had also revealed the depth of his own resilience. For years, he had carried the weight of inherited fear, the memory of his father, the lessons of his mother, and countless small encounters of prejudice, but now he understood that trauma could be transformed into strength. The silver sedan, once a vessel of anxiety and danger, had become a symbol of endurance. Every careful movement, measured word, and patient breath during the stop had reinforced Marcus's understanding of courage. It was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. He recognized that survival in a biased world required awareness, composure, and the ability to act with dignity, even when the odds felt stacked against him. Marcus began to see his past experiences not as scars, but as tools for growth. The discomfort, the anxiety, and the tension he had endured over the years had forged an inner strength that allowed him to face challenges with clarity and purpose. He realized that each encounter with bias had prepared him for moments like this one, moments that demanded patience, intelligence, and courage simultaneously. The stop was more than a test of endurance. It was a lesson in empowerment. He also recognized the broader significance of his experience. By navigating the stop with calm and integrity, Marcus had modeled resilience for others in his communities, especially for young Black men who might face similar situations. His composure, patience, and refusal to be intimidated turned a moment of potential danger into an opportunity for growth and inspiration. Beyond the immediate event, Marcus found new purpose in using his voice to educate, to advocate, and to foster understanding. The trauma he had endured was no longer a burden he carried silently. It was a source of strength that could influence others, challenge assumptions, and inspire meaningful change. He had turned fear into courage, injustice into awareness, and vulnerability into empowerment. As Marcus reflected on his journey, he felt a quiet pride. The traffic stop, the bias, and the tension had all left a mark, but they had also catalyzed his growth. Marcus Hale had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever, ready to turn adversity into advocacy and challenge prejudice not only for himself, but for the community around him. Marcus Hale sat in the quiet of his car for a moment, taking a deep breath before heading toward his interview. The morning's tension still lingered, but it had transformed into focus and determination. The traffic stop, the bias, and the fear had tested him, but now he carried something stronger: clarity, resilience, and an unshakable sense of self. As he walked into the office building, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned. The fear that had gripped him in the silver sedan now seemed like a teacher, a reminder of his capacity to remain calm, measured, and courageous even in the face of injustice. He understood that life would continue to present challenges, but the stop had given him proof that he could navigate them with dignity and strength. The interview itself became another test of composure. Marcus answered questions with confidence, articulating his skills, vision, and potential clearly. He realized that the courage he had demonstrated on the streets of Willow Creek, standing firm, asserting his voice, and managing fear, was equally valuable in professional and personal settings. The morning's ordeal had shown him the power of preparation, awareness, and self-assurance, qualities that now illuminated his presence in the room. Beyond the interview, Marcus felt a broader sense of purpose. He knew that the events of that morning could serve as a foundation for advocacy, conversation, and change. His experience, once a source of fear, was now a story he could share with others to raise awareness about prejudice and the importance of standing firm in moments of challenge. Marcus recognized that personal growth and community impact could emerge even from the most difficult encounters. Driving home later, Marcus reflected on the journey he had undertaken. The silver sedan, the officers, the bystanders, and the fear, all of it had become a catalyst for empowerment. He felt a renewed sense of hope, not only for his own future, but for the potential of the community around him. The morning had tested him, shaped him, and prepared him for the opportunities ahead. Marcus Hale realized that the future, while uncertain, was brighter and more promising than ever. He had turned fear into courage, confrontation into clarity, and trauma into strength. As he looked toward new opportunities, he felt ready to embrace them fully, carrying forward the lessons of resilience, dignity, and hope that had been forged on the quiet streets of Willow Creek. The journey had been difficult, but it had also illuminated the path to a meaningful, empowered, and purposeful life. Marcus Hale drove along the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the familiar hum of his silver sedan filling the air. For years, these roads had been fraught with tension, fear, and the weight of systemic bias. Every glance from passing cars, every interaction with authority had carried an invisible risk. Yet now, after the morning's harrowing stop and the lessons it had imparted, the streets felt different. They felt like a place of possibility rather than threat. He reflected on the journey he had undertaken. The fear that had once gripped him, inherited from family stories and past experiences, had transformed into a deep understanding of his own strength. Each moment of tension during the stop, the scrutiny, the commands, the subtle biases had revealed his ability to remain composed, deliberate, and courageous. Marcus realized that the road itself had never been the enemy. It was the fear he carried along it. Now, that fear had been tempered by experience, reflection, and resilience. Marcus also thought about the broader implications of his story. The encounter had sparked conversations, inspired awareness in the community, and highlighted the power of witnessing, courage, and dignity. He understood that his journey was not only personal but collective, a reflection of the challenges many faced and the resilience required to navigate them. His calm, measured responses had shown that strength was not loud or aggressive, could be quiet, intentional, and profoundly impactful. Driving forward, Marcus felt a sense of empowerment. The morning's events had equipped him with a renewed purpose to use his voice, experience, and resilience to advocate for justice and understanding. The road no longer symbolized danger or limitation. It represented the journey of growth, courage, and transformation. Every mile was a testament to his ability to face fear and emerge stronger. By the time he reached the edge of town, Marcus understood a fundamental truth. Fear could be acknowledged, confronted, and ultimately transformed into power. The streets he once approached with caution were now a landscape of possibility. He could navigate them with confidence, purpose, and hope, knowing that courage, composure, and dignity were his companions. Marcus Hale had traveled more than distance that day. He had journeyed through fear, prejudice, and tension and emerged on the other side with clarity, strength, and a road no longer feared.